a special edition of Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw. That would be your Chickasaw native, your Chickasaw Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And what a treat we got today, because if you were like me and Mr. Brisco, you burned up an 8-track playing Slow Ride over all 9 minutes of it, over and over and over and over and over. Foghat Live multi-platinum album. They got a new album out. It's just come out. We've got the lead singer, Scot Holt, who has 7 of his own albums. Listened to the album last night. Incredible album. I don't know if it's blues. I don't know if it's rock. I know it's very, very good. We got Mr. Scot Holt with us. Scot, welcome to the show.
Man, it's great to be here. Thank y'all for having me.
Hey, Scott, man, welcome aboard here, man. Yeah, reading up on you, man. What an amazing career you had, and man, we're just honored to have you here. We were John and I were talking earlier, you know, about old Foghat. You know, when I just started making some money in 1972, and of course, first thing I did, I went out and bought me a Mercedes convertible.
Nice.
And it did not have a good stereo system in it, of course, back in those days. So I went and found me a good old 8-track player and had it installed, put the amplifiers in there, put the extra speakers in there, and I had a little convertible, man, it just vibrated with Foghat. I want to make love to you, man. and you know, coming home, you know, we're like rock and rollers. We work at nighttime.
Right.
So we were traveling on the road all the time. So I get loaded up. I get me back in those days, you could have a case of beer in the car and not get in trouble, you know. So I iced me down some beer. I go to those little towns in Carolina and crank that music up about 2:00 in the morning, keep awake, man. Foghat kept me awake on many of those road trips. I got pulled. I can't tell you how many times I got pulled. I got pulled about 5 times in this one town. They set their alarm clock by me coming through their town at nighttime. But man, thanks a lot. I know that was before your time, but man, you must have hit the jackpot right off the bat in your career. At 18 years old, you was working with Buddy Guy, one of the legends in the business. How did that happen?
I got lucky, man. I my dad hooked up an introduction to Buddy when I first started playing guitar, and I met him, saw him play for the first time, and was just blown away, and just instantly knew that I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. So you know, he took me under his wing. I don't know why he liked me, but we got along really good, and I spent 10 years with him, you know, learning the trade and learning what to do. And then,
was your dad a musician also? What?
No, he was just a supportive dad. You know,
Wow,
both my parents supported me. I used to say in interviews that if I'd wanted to be a porn star, they would have helped me to be the best porn star. my mom doesn't like that joke at all, so I had to
funny how moms they don't find the guy humor real funny.
She didn't think that was funny at all, and I was like, well, it's you know, it's a metaphor, Mom. She's like, no.
Use a different metaphor.
How did your dad know Buddy Guy? How did he arrange the meeting? All of that.
He didn't know him. That was the funny thing about it. He saw that Buddy and Junior Wells were coming to play in Tampa, and he found out that Buddy had a club in Chicago. He called the club. It was a former club, so Buddy didn't own it anymore, and the guy that owned it was just giving Buddy's home phone number out to people. So he gave my dad his phone number. He called him at home. And he said, I got a son that wants to learn how to play guitar, and he'd like to meet you. And he goes, yeah, that's fine. Come to the show and we'll hook it up. So it was all just, my dad's just, you know, he was just bold. You know, he didn't have any hesitation and stuff like that.
And that's a great dad, man. Just reach out there. You know, we had Mickey Raphael on the show here. You know, we're talking about the blues and everything. And, you know, of course, that's what you're noted for, is the blues. And
right.
And he, you know, how did a white boy like you in Tennessee come up with those great blues licks like that? I mean, that's phenomenal.
I don't know, man. I growing up in where I grew up, I'm about 45 miles south of Nashville, and I've lived here all my life, basically. Raised our daughter here, got married here, and so I'm in that confluence. You know, I got country music coming at me from the north. I got the blues coming from Memphis. I got New Orleans is south of me, so it's all like right here. And then when I got with Buddy, you know, for 10 years, I was just immersed in all kinds of music. I mean, it was funny because I joined the band thinking, well, it's just going to be a hardcore, everybody listens to blues all the time, and that's all we're going to be hearing. it was nothing like that. No, none of them listened to the blues. They were all listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire and jazz and stuff like that. So I was getting immersed in everything.
Buddy Guy was such a legend, or is such a legend. He's still alive.
Yeah.
And he is. Was he as big? Like some guys, when you see him walk into a room, you know this guy is somebody special. You know, Buddy Guy, he was, I guess, discovered. He was, his story is incredible. A janitor at LSU when he made his first album, then all of a sudden he ends up going on tour. When you first met him, what was your impression of Buddy Guy? Was he that guy you look at and go, wow, that guy's a star? Or was he just a nice guy? What was your impression?
Well, when I first met him was backstage at the show. So that's, you know, he was full on Buddy Guy. He was a little bit intimidating to me because I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, when he played, you know, he jumped off the stage and he went out in the street and he had this long guitar chord and I'd never seen anybody do anything like that. So the first meeting was that. It was meeting Mike Tyson right after he knocked somebody out. You're like, whoa. You know, the next day at his hotel, he invited me to his hotel for a guitar lesson the next day, and I went there, and he was just a really cool, nice guy. You know, I mean, he was just very, you know, very friendly and just talk. I mean, we spent 4 hours talking about guitars and the blues and Sonny Boy Williamson and Little Walter and just he was just giving me information, you know, and it was just the kindness that it was genuine, you know.
And what was it? Did you ever ask him what was it about you that he took you in? I mean, here's this kid who was introduced by a father who was very persistent, who found his home phone number, who called him, and all of a sudden the next day he's giving him a guitar lesson. I mean, that doesn't normally happen with great big stars. I mean,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I don't know why, why we hit it off. I mean, we had similar backgrounds. I mean, he grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm. So we had that in common. We were both from the South. And we both love the same kinds of music. I mean, we would both get just as excited about an Earl Hooker guitar solo on a Muddy Waters record. And those were the things that he was listening to coming up. And that's what I was listening to coming up. So I think we just, we had a lot of similarities.
How long had you been playing when you first walked into Buddy Guy's dressing room there?
I had been playing about 8 months, maybe.
8 months. Wow. Yeah. Did you have any skill? You must have had some skill for Buddy to pay attention to you.
No, I had determination and time on my hands. So all I did was practice all the time.
Yeah.
What was your first experience of touring? I mean, it was you'd never toured, you'd never done anything like that, right? I mean, you hadn't even been in a band yet, and all of a sudden you're with the great Buddy Guy on tour.
Yeah. Wow.
I left home with a suitcase, a guitar, an amplifier, and a one-way plane ticket to Chicago. I didn't know if I was ever even coming back home. I didn't know if I was getting paid. I didn't know how much I was getting paid. Didn't care. And Buddy picked me up at the airport, took me to his house, cooked supper for me. And then he took me to the club, and I got in a van with a bunch of guys I'd never met, and we're headed to Canada. And
wow.
The keyboard player who'd been around the block a few times was really nice, and he offered me the front seat of the van, for this nice ride to Canada, which I thought, well, that's very kind. It's an overnight trip to Canada, and I get to sit in the front seat, which is sitting straight up for 8 hours. So I learned real quick that you gotta judge what's going on and figure out where you need to be. So.
Yeah, there's a few rules of the road that you got to abide by when you get with a group like that. It's the same with the wrestling. They always set the rookies up in the front seat.
Exactly. And you know what? The biggest similarity between rock and roll and wrestling is they're both full contact sports. So you're constantly engaged.
Mr. Brisco, Jim, the security guy from down in Florida, right? His first day on the plane, there was Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, all these legends on the plane, and all he wants to do is disappear on Vince McMahon's plane. And so he gets on. Vince is out handling with the guys as he always did. And I say, Jim, that seat's always empty. Just sit there. Of course, it was Vince McMahon's seat. He got up. And I thought if he had a gun, he would shoot me right now. To this day, it was 20 years ago. To this day, he reminds me of that like it was yesterday. It's the great ribs of when you get the new guy on the road. It's sometimes it's a lot of fun.
There's nothing like getting a new guy on the road just so you can abuse them.
Did you know enough?
I know we're brutal with our rookies. Are you guys the same? And when they come in, I mean, they are the rookies aside all the menial tasks and all the hard work?
You know, being in the business as long as I've been in it, you know, in the early days, yeah, definitely it was brutal. But now, you know, I've been the new guy so many times. I have a lot more compassion for the new guy.
Oh yeah, yeah. You get that after a while.
Yeah, man.
Don't do that to him, man. Don't do that to him. He's a nice guy.
Did you know enough to be overwhelmed by all of that?
No, and that was the real fortunate thing. And every, you know, I've had the opportunity to play with some real icons. I mean, Buddy Guy, Leo Lyons from 10 Years After played in my band for a while. Roger is, you know, the drummer for Foghat for the entire history of the band. And with Buddies, especially, I was so young and so naive that it, you know, the impact of it didn't really mean anything. Even when people like Eric Clapton were coming to our show, to Buddy's shows, and wanting to meet Buddy and talk to him, you know, I was so green that I just, you know, okay, there, Clapton's here, cool, you know. And years after I left Buddy, it started hitting me. Wow, you know, you were standing on stage with an icon, and that's right. You know, then I would get nervous and start sweating and go get in the closet and hide for a little while. So,
and that's strange. You know, you think about afterthought, man. You do, but you know, John and I, we talked many times. You know, we both come up. He's a Texas boy, and I'm an Oklahoma boy. We come up from rural areas there. You know, you're standing in the middle of the ring in Madison Square Garden. You got all those banners above you. And most of you got 15 to 20,000 people screaming. All of a sudden, you look across the ring, and there's one of the icons of the business there. Did you ever get those feelings, you know, when you walk in, or Eric Clapton walked in? You know, nowadays, I mean, back then you were so young you didn't know any better, but nowadays, you know, man, how did I get here?
Yeah,
you know, what a feeling.
I've had a lot of those, you know, pinch me moments, you know, and you know, I'm grateful for every experience and opportunity I've had. I mean, I've through the guitar, I've been able to meet all my heroes, you know, some of the most important people in my life. You know, some of my longest friendships are people that I met through music, you know, and I'm grateful for all of it. But yeah, the older I get and the more miles I get on me, I'm trying to learn the art of taking it at that moment, you know, like when something when you're in the moment, realizing how special it is, you know, because every time I get on stage could be the last time. So
yeah, it could be. Yeah. Well, what number of years you had now?
I've been doing this probably 30 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And at a high level too, not at just a.
Well, I've been drug into some rarefied air. It wasn't me doing it, you know.
You had the skill to get there.
You got to play with BB King also, right?
Yeah, I got to play with BB. I got to know John Lee Hooker, and I got to know these guys as people. You know, I mean, it wasn't just meeting them through my record collection. Like the only way I know Frank Sinatra is through my record collection. But I've been to John Lee Hooker's house and hung out with him. I've spent a lot of time with BB King, Albert Collins. These are people that you know were mentors to me and would talk to me and directly and say, "Hey, Scott, you know, whatever." BB King offered me some of his breakfast one morning at an airport, which horrified me. I was like, no, sir, that's your food. You eat it.
Yeah, BB King and Albert were the first blues concert I ever saw when I was a kid. I was in Stillwater, Oklahoma, going to Oklahoma State University. They come through town and they played at the student union there. And I think I was in between my senior year in high school, and I had to sneak in through the balcony to get in. And one of Albert's people saw me coming in, and he kind of come over. And I thought, man, I've already get thrown out. I hadn't even heard the song yet. And he kind of laughed at me. Kid, what's the matter? I said, man, I don't have the money. I'm not old enough to be here. He said, go over and stand up against the wall there. I'll keep an eye on you. I'll make sure you get to stay in there. I couldn't believe how nice you guys were.
That is cool. See, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
Was there any commonality between all these guys about how they viewed music? I mean, some guys use music as an outlet. Some guys see music as an art. So was there any commonality, let's say, the BB King and Buddy Guy and these incredible legends, how they viewed their music?
That's a good question. I mean, it was just a part of them, you know. I mean, it was part of their identity, and it was as natural to them as the kind of clothes they wore, or I mean, what their drink of choice was. It was just a part of that whole thing, and it just flowed together. I mean, when I was around somebody like BB or with Buddy, the conversation would flow from music to women to cars to whatever, but it was all like one common thread.
How would you define this album? Because I was listening to it last night. The album, by the way, is just excellent. Sonic Mojo is the name of the album for those out there listening. But you have Driving On, which is different from a little bit of everything, and listen to some of it almost sounds like Jerry Lee Lewis some of them, and some of them sounds more like blues. How would you define the music that the album is? Is there a genre that it fits into, or does it fit into several?
I think it's a celebration of American music, which is what Foghat's always been about. If you go back and listen throughout the catalog, they built their career on the songbooks of Chuck Berry and Willie Dixon, but they've dipped their toe into all kinds of different American forms of music. All that stuff came from America: the blues, jazz, rock, R&B, and with this album, we've done sort of a full circle thing of celebrating all of it. There's songs on there by Chuck Berry. There's songs on there by Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon.
And Hank Williams.
Hank Williams is a big part of one of those songs on there. And Kim Simmons, the founder of Savoy Brown, wrote 3 of the songs on there with us. So Savoy Brown was the first band that Roger was in. So it's all kind of full circle for this record. And I'm real proud of it. I think it's a good record. I like it.
You bring up Savoy Brown there. That's another. He was part of my collection back in that Mercedes-Benz days too. And I couldn't understand. I love big fan of Savoy Brown, and then Foghat big fan of. I didn't realize I was listening to the same people. Back then we had no Google to find out who the band members were.
Right. There was no internet back then.
So here I was a big fan of the same guy, and so he must have made a big impression on me musically.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, it was that's a funny thing too, is even in my age, when I started playing guitar, there wasn't any YouTube or internet or computers, any of that stuff. And so when I talk to younger musicians than me, and they'll Google it and they've got the lick already, and for me it's like, I didn't know what Jimi Hendrix looked like, and he's my biggest hero, and it took me forever to find any kind of video of him to see him playing. So it's a weird transition from that era to this era. I'm still waiting on my Mercedes-Benz era, though. That's
me too. I don't know how I missed it.
I had one, and I learned my lesson right away. But I put 200,000 miles on that little car. That's how long I had to have it, man. Well, what a little 2-seater. I tell you, it was great when making those little trips over to Myrtle Beach. So as a single young guy.
Oh yeah.
I had a good time. Convertible, I was one of those hotels, man.
Yes, sir.
and like I said, the German people had crappy stereos back in the 70s and putting those cars. So the first thing I turned that radio on, man, this just won't do. So the upgrade was coming, and that was my next week. 2 paychecks was the upgrade on my stereo on my Mercedes there. But
I've probably always spent way more on my sound systems than I have on the mechanics of the car.
Because back then you had to put the amplifier together, you had to get the speakers, you had to get the stereo. It was like a real dilemma putting the entire system together.
Exactly. It was a when I was in high school, man, you were constantly just thinking about what the next component was that had to go in your truck.
Yeah,
that's right. Did you need an equalizer to go with the amplifier? Because they work together.
Had to have a graphic EQ, and all that stuff. Oh yeah. And of course,
I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing something.
I didn't either. Usually I had everything just dimed, so it was all just louder.
That was such an incredible time in Memphis and Nashville. I mean, you're so lucky that you're a music guy that grew up in the center of some of the greatest music ever being played. Right. What did those guys consider the music? I mean, you had the Highwaymen, you had Elvis, you had Jerry Lee, you had B.B. King, you had great blues guys, you had great rock guys, you had great country guys. Did any of them consider themselves one particular thing, or they just think I'm playing music?
I think they just thought they're playing music. I mean, with Buddy especially, you know, I used to do one time for a joke. I played He Stopped Loving Her Today on stage, and he loved it. And he was like, from then on, when he would give me a song on stage, he was like, "Man, play that country thing you play, that country and western song you play."
That's great.
I'm like, really? You want to do a George Jones song? But George Jones is one of the greatest blues singers to ever live. I mean, you know, that's a blues song if there's ever a blues song. You know.
Yeah, there's so much influence that's a crossover between the groups. When you're sitting down and you're thinking of music, how does that process work? Because I love music and I can play you know, well, it used to be the jukebox, now it's your iTunes.
Right.
But I have no idea. Nothing in me it comes into a song in my head that organically. How does that happen in your head?
Well, it's hard to talk about it, and it's not to, I'm trying not to sound too mystical about it, but it is really just a stream. And you, as a musician, you know, every once in a while you're lucky enough to get your finger into that stream and catch something. And it could be a chord progression, or it could be a melody, or it could be a lyric that sparks it, and then you're off. And you know, it's kind of like looking at the sun. You have to kind of look at it out of the side. You can't look at it dead on. So when you're chasing those songs, you just have to let them come to you. And you know, I mean, it's like a centipede. If you think about it too much, you know, how does he walk? If he thinks about it too much, he's going to fall over, you know? So, you just have to kind of let the music come to you. Or I do. I can't write them on command. You know, I have to just wait for it to hit me.
Now, when you write something and you know do you know it's spectacular? Do you know it's going to be a hit, or do you just have some swing the message right there?
Well, Jerry, if I knew it was going to be a hit, I'd already have had my Mercedes moment, you know. Because I got your beat on that one, Scott. I don't intentionally write.
Right now, I got me a 25-year-old truck sitting out in my garage right now.
Mine's about 15 years. My truck's about 15 years old. It's sitting out there.
But it's a Jack Rouse special, though. It's a Jack Rouse special. I don't know.
You're doing all right with that. You're doing all right.
Hey, to be fair, Scott, when Mr. Brisco and his brother Jack Brisco, the famous Brisco brothers, sold Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon to this day said it's the only time he ever did a bad deal. So that Mercedes was paid for many times by Mr.
There you go. There you go.
To this day, Vince holds it against Mr. Brisco.
Yeah, even to this day, he'll still bring it up just out of the blue somewhere. And I told him, well, I'm Native American. I said, you know, Vince, it was just our opportunity to get Manhattan back. You know,
every little bit we can get back. See,
yeah, exactly. It's a slow creep. You're just getting some of it back, some of it back, some of it back.
That's it.
When you're thinking of this music, do you think about the lyrics, the words? When does this all come together in your head?
Well, I mean, it's just an organic thing, you know. I mean, sometimes, like I said, it's a lyric that'll come up first, or an idea. You know, I wrote a song one time called "Civil War," and the idea was how, when I started writing it, was how easy it is to wage wars. You don't really have to get dirty anymore. You can push a button and send a bunch of missiles somewhere and blow stuff up. And as I started writing the song, it changed into a song about divorce and a man and a woman trying to, you know, disengage in a very kind way, in a civil way, and realizing that the heart's not like that. And I didn't, you know, I've never been divorced, so I didn't plan on writing a song about divorce, but it ended up being, you know, one of the best songs I think I've ever written.
And are those words that you're writing, how does the music fit to that? Is it separate?
No, I mean, the one will kind of lead the other. Like if you're writing a song and you start with the music, you know, you'll kind of start hearing phrases that'll kind of fit with the music. If you start with the lyric, you kind of put the music to flow with the lyric. So it's kind of a, you know, man, it's a little bit like cooking. You know, you taste it and add a little salt, or taste it and put some Tabasco in it, and, you know, get it where you need it, you know.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just I'm not an artist. The only thing I've ever drawn is unemployment. So I'm not. It's
I drew
just
a little
so
bit of that too.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, Mr. Brisco is the one that hired me back in 1995. To this day, he still regrets it. He apologizes regularly for doing that.
You know, you're always entitled to one mistake in your career, you know, and that was one of them.
Well, I've used up several mistakes in my career, so somebody.
Well, I have too. I have too, brother.
Gary Von Erich, the legendary Von Erich wrestler, used to tell me, he goes, I want to come back as a carpenter, and that way I can repair all the bridges I burned. So,
that's awesome.
So I'm kind of
when you wrestlers are notorious for playing tricks on each other. You know, even the big guys, they like Big Show and Andre. You know, they all people were playing tricks. You guys play tricks on the young guys, like what we call them ribs. You pull ribs on the young guys and the good bad. Or times change, So it's the same way in the wrestling business where they don't do it anymore. That's a lost art.
It is a lost art. It is a lost art. It's kind of, you know, the ribbon that we do now is pretty gentle compared to what I experienced when I was first starting out. But yeah, it's you know, I think everybody's kind of everybody's been the new guy, so they're kind of more polite to the new guys these days.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to call them ribs. Back in the day, we would call them felonies. Because some of them were so bad. You tell people about it now, and I know you had the same thing. You know, you tell people some of your road stories now, and people are like, they just look at you and they don't believe you. I'm not lying. I'm not actually telling you the worst part.
Well, when you're on the road, you know, there's a lot of downtime. You know, you think about it. You're as I know as a wrestler, but as a musician too. You know, your show is only like an hour and a half. The rest of the time is waiting. So you know, there's all musicians always choose their poison. What's going to occupy my time? You know, fortunately for me, it was staying in my hotel room and playing my guitar, which kept me out of a lot of trouble. But you know, some of the other guys, they thought up other diabolical ways to.
Well, the problem is you've got really creative guys who've got excess money, who've got star power, who can get away with a lot of things they probably shouldn't get away with. And there was nothing else to do back then. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. There was no video game. It was left to your own devices, which was a terrible thing for a creative guy with access to money and fame.
Exactly. More money than sense. That's, you know.
Exactly. The touring that you did, what was like the most touring that you did during this time? Like say a buddy guy, or even now you guys are starting to tour again. Were you on the road for say a month at a time? What was a tour schedule like?
When I was with Buddy, I think the longest time we were on the road in a straight stretch was like 6 weeks. And for me, that I started hitting the wall after about week 4. You know, I was kind of like, I'm ready to go home now.
We're just getting tuned up at week 4.
Yeah, well, you know, musically it's getting better, but psychologically it's getting like, you know, and we would, you know, usually that was in Europe where we'd be out for a really long time. So you're changing countries every day, you're changing money every day, you know, your time zones are different, the languages are different, the food's different, you know, and at first it's all real cool, but then about week 4, week 5, you know, you've had
you want to go home.
Yeah. So but with Foghat, you know, it's usually weekends. I mean, we'll do like 3 shows in a row, maybe. And that's a pretty nice way to travel. You know, we're not really out for real long stretches of time. You know, I'm not coming home as a stranger to my wife and my daughter. You know, they still remember me, and so it's a real good season.
I was watching.
That's. Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry. Mine froze up. So go ahead.
Okay, that was always an issue with wrestling. You know, I mean, even when I very first started, you know, we go to Japan, and I was kind of an honor to go to Japan. But nowadays they're over there 2 days, 3 days at max, and they're back. You know, back when John and I were, my first tour was a 6-week tour. Man, I was in rural Oklahoma. Japan. I'd never been away from home in all my life. I wrestled in Oklahoma State. My big trip was going to Lincoln, Nebraska, you know, for a wrestling bill, you know. And now all of a sudden I'm in an airplane headed to Japan for 6 weeks, man. The first week it's just all new, every year just, wow, this is cool. This is cool. Second week, it's still cool. Third week, oh man, I'm ready. Fourth, about that fourth and fifth week, man, you're miserable. You made everybody around you miserable, and they're miserable. They want to go home.
Yeah, because if you're miserable, you got to make everybody else miserable.
Yeah.
For sure.
If you got an unhappy person on the road, man, it's bad for everybody. Nobody.
Yeah, we used to go to all the islands in Japan. We'd travel all over the bullet train, buses. We were over there a long time, and that's when there wasn't a lot of American say influence restaurants, anything outside of Tokyo.
Well, I was in Japan back in the 90s with Buddy, and I mean, it was, and we were, pretty much the ugly Americans. I mean, we were pretty much Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, when we could find it. And I kind of regret that. I hope to go back to Japan because I'd like to kind of engage with
make amends.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, Roppongi
rebuild that bridge.
Of course, Roppongi with Hard Rock Cafe. Every American has to go down there.
We did that. We were merciless with the Hard Rocks. That was if you could get a good cheeseburger, you were in high cotton, man. You were doing something.
I was listening to a podcast you did talking about Japan, how the Japanese fans would know all the lyrics to your songs.
Yeah, they would sing.
Amazing.
Japanese audiences. I remember being on stage waiting to go on in Japan, and they've got a curtain, so the curtain's closed. And it's dead quiet. And I'm like, well, when are they going to let the people in? They go, oh, they're in. Well, what is it, like 2 people? No, it's sold out. It's full. Pull the curtain back. Sure enough, full room. We would play the song, and then they would go bananas. And then they would stop. And while we're playing, they didn't make any sound at all. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And they would sing the words back to you, in English, which they could do flawlessly, and I couldn't say hello in Japan, in Japanese. So
that was one of the frustrating things about being a wrestler over there. That audience, they were so polite, but they wouldn't, like you said, it was scary because they wouldn't say a damn word. You do a big move, and okay, what's next? Then after you told them the story a little bit and they got into it, they'd start reacting. But they had to get into your story before they reacted. They're a great audience, but they were intimidating as hell because you didn't know how to get them to respond.
Exactly.
At least in our field.
It was I think it's true in everything. That was a real cultural, difference. Is you got to figure out how to get them going, and we're both in the entertainment business. Your audience is that's who you're working for. And what your bag of tricks on how you get them going, if you get in a situation where your bag of tricks ain't working, it can make you kind of nervous.
You talk about the bag of tricks in the live audience. I love the art of being able to perform in front of a live audience, and I don't care what the medium is that gets you there, the carrot that gets the people in the crowd, but the art of being in front of a live crowd. You have a little different perspective. You were talking about in one of the podcasts I listened to about how you view it and how, say, maybe Foghat views it, is you enjoy engaging with the audience more, talking with the audience more than just playing the catalog. Now, I was wondering also, is that just because maybe Foghat has, you've got all of these albums, so many albums, it's hard to get, when your main song is 9 minutes, it's hard to get all that catalog in there.
Exactly.
What is your view? Tell me about how you perceive going out in front of a live crowd.
Well, to me, and this is something else I learned from Buddy, it's about entertaining. You want the audience to be glad that they're there, and you want them leaving saying, I want to come back and see this again. I want to experience this again. This, and I want to bring my friends with me. This made me happy. And, you do that by interacting with the audience and getting them to be a part of it, and that's the way Buddy always has done it. And I learned that from him. With Foghat, sometimes I get in trouble because they have a bunch of songs, and some of them are kind of long, and if I get to talking too much, it runs us, our curfew it's in jeopardy. So, but yeah, that's just the way I've always done it. I mean, it's the audience is part of the deal. It's not us playing to them. It's us playing with them.
Is there? Are there any signals?
I've had Roger kick the song off in the middle of a sentence. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I really love, like our tag team, the band up there. We're like a band, with four of us in a ring, and you kind of take cues from each other. And watching your music is so tight. And we asked Mickey the same question. What constitute? I mean, who's your leader? And I listened to a podcast. You said Roger, the drummer. I watch when the sticks are up. I know it's time for me to hit.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he's the quarterback of the team. I mean, he, especially on Slow Ride, that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
The way that song starts off, it's him starting it, and then I'm the very next thing that comes in. And if I come in wrong, it destroys everything. And I've come in wrong before, and it destroyed everything. A horrifying experience.
What a feeling, huh?
Oh man. It was like, but yeah, he's the leader, and he sets the pace, and then it's up to us to just, make sure we're hitting on all cylinders.
The video you had, well, I think one of maybe driving on was, it's just, and I mean this in a compliment, and because I'm the same age, it's just a bunch of old cool dudes rocking, and it's just fun to watch, because I'm so glad I've got to watch the video, because I get to see you guys just sit. It's just awesome to see old cool dudes rocking. Are you guys having as much fun as you look like you're having?
More. I mean, you can't show all your fun, because you won't be able to do what you're supposed to be doing. But yeah, that's the nice thing about this band, is that we genuinely love each other. We genuinely are having a ball. When I tell the audience every night, ask them if they've had a good time, and then I tell them, I promise you, we've had a better time than you've had. I mean, we travel together, on off nights, we get together and go to dinner and break bread and hang out and laugh, and there's just not anything bad about this band or this situation, for me anyway. They may have some different comments, but I'm having a hell of a time.
Yeah, you were with Buddy, 14 years, something like that, right?
10 years, yeah. I was with him for
10 years. Had the transition from Buddy to Foghat. I know you were filling in for a couple of guys that were had some illnesses with Foghat, and finally replaced one of them. How did all that happen? I mean, were you good friends, obviously, with Foghat before that, or what?
We had a mutual friend. They were looking for like an understudy for everybody in the band. They wanted a backup.
Which is smart.
Well, yeah, especially when you start getting a little older, and things start falling off, and you have to get them put back on. And so our mutual friend introduced me to Roger as a potential understudy for Charlie, the singer at the time. And so we got together and we just hit it off, man. We both loved Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis, and we started playing songs together, and almost immediately started writing songs together, and just got on. We just liked each other. And so I just kind of stayed around the camp. When they got ready to do their next record, which was Under the Influence, they needed about 3 more songs for the record. We ended up writing 17. So we put together another band and put another album out called Earl and the Agitators, and just kept hanging around and kept doing stuff. So I was in Florida at their studio writing for this record, but for Charlie to sing it. And while we were down there, he decided that he was going to retire, and we just pivoted and said, well, okay, you want to sing? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So they let me bump my head and skin my knees for a while, and then I finally figured out where I fit into the thing, and so hopefully, knock on wood, they're happy. I'm happy. So
well, you've got a #1 album.
Yeah,
Mr. Brisco and I both listened to it last night. Just freaking, it's just excellent. It's just so much fun to listen to. How has your sound changed from you being the front man to Foghat, say back from the 70s and 80s, the Foghat that Mr. Brisco played on the 8-track in his Mercedes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I don't sound anything like Dave, who was the original lead singer. And I don't play guitar like Dave. And Brian really doesn't play guitar like Rod. we're when you have a band, you can't unplug one component of the band and plug something else in and have it be the same. It doesn't work that way. It's more like a marriage or a relationship. You there's different nuances and you move in different ways. I'm sure it's the same. Like if you're tag team wrestling, if you're used to one partner and all of a sudden you're with somebody else, now you're trying to figure out, somebody's going to get an elbow in the nose accidentally, I guess, but you didn't duck at the right spot.
Our own purpose.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah. So in a band, and that was one of the first things I had to figure out was, because you got to stay in your lane. Somebody comes to a show, they want to hear Slow Ride that sounds like Slow Ride. That sounds like they heard it on the radio when they were a kid. And so you got to figure out, okay, I got to do that, but I've also got to be me, and I've got to figure out where those two things, exist together. And that's kind of the challenge, but it's also the fun of it, is learning these new spots about where, what I can do that's natural to me and still support the Foghat.
I saw an interview you did where you talk about your first time with Foghat when you're the lead man, and it didn't go as well as you wanted it to. And I was being kind. Your words were much worse than I'm sure it was actually much better than what you thought it was. Your perfectionist. But then you immersed yourself in Foghat and became, now that you got this #1 album. Were you worried at the time that this may not be a fit?
Yeah, I was. I mean, the first gig that I played, I filled in for Charlie on a gig. And that was horrible. That was where I wrecked Slow Ride, and we had to stop and start it over, which as a musician, you don't ever want to do that.
Wow.
But then
when you stopped and started over, you're like,
dude, that whole show was a nightmare for me. I mean, first of all, we don't drink before we play, which was the exact opposite of when I was with Buddy. We always took a shot before we hit the stage.
Right.
So you get on the stage and I've got cotton mouth. And I've got all these cues and things that I've got to try to remember to hit. I've got these rhythm parts, and I've also got to sing, and I've got all these words I got to remember. And so, yeah, the first one was just a nightmare. But then you fast forward to the when Charlie retired, and they said, okay, we've got gigs coming up in 2 weeks. Let's put the album on the shelf for a minute, and let's work on the set for these shows we got coming up. And we did our first rehearsal. And it was horrible. I mean, I hadn't played a Foghat song in, 2 years since that last gig. I'd been working on my own music and doing other stuff. And we played, for about 2 hours and it was pretty quiet. When the last thing died out, everybody was kind of like, oh man.
Everybody feels that, right? Everybody knows it's wrong.
Yeah. But everybody kind of knew who was the missing link, you know? So
who was making it wrong?
Yeah. So I just said, okay, I kind of talked to myself and I said, all right, you're gonna do this. You're gonna have to dig deep. So I just immersed myself in everything Foghat and dug hard. And the next day was a little bit better, and the next day was a little bit better. And we hit the road, and all that first year, every night I felt a little more comfortable. It got a little bit better, a little bit easier. And now it's a lot more natural to me. There's still nights when I catch myself going, okay, is this next part's coming up? It's coming up, but it's less that now and more just excited and happy to be playing with my friends.
Did you ever talk to other band members about those first couple sessions?
Yeah, I mean they knew what I was going through, and as a musician, everybody's been through it. You're never the #1 guy in every situation. You're always on the bottom at some point. And it's just it's an unpleasant place to be. But I was with
we've been there. We've been there.
Oh man, I was with a group of guys that were very patient and very supportive. I mean, Rodney and Rodney's the bass player. He and I would sit together, and he would help me, talk about phrasing of the vocals and stuff, because he's really up on all the Foghat catalog. And Brian, the other guitar player, we would sit together and talk about, which parts go where and who plays what. And even now on stage, sometimes he'll give me a look like, okay, this is your spot coming up. And, so they've all just been really kind to me and let me find my foot. So, it's been a real good journey.
Well, I'll say it's got to be a thrill. I mean, what, 2 years now, and you guys got your first #1 chart album, right?
Yeah.
And what a feeling that. I mean, tell us the reaction when that thing hit #1.
Well, I knew it was going to be #1, and I told him that while we were recording it, and I told him that when we got done recording it, and I told them that when they put the record out, I said it's going to be #1, and they all kind of went, oh yeah, okay. And so the day that the Billboard chart came out and it was #1, I got to say, I told you so. I knew it was going to be #1.
It's funny. I was in Europe one time with Mr. Briscoe was there. I was with Wrestling Undertaker, and he's one of the greatest of all time. And the match just didn't work. I mean, it didn't work. It just didn't work. And when it came back, Undertaker looked at me and goes, "Well, that didn't work. That was bad." And you're like sitting there going, I don't know what happened. It worked the night before. It worked the next night. Do you get that sometimes when you're out performing? I know you do. Like sometimes you play. People think you can just play the same thing over and over and over, and sometimes it just hits. And when it hits, it's magical, and that's what you live for. It's like the straight line drug, in your arm. But it's magical. But sometimes
I thought you weren't an artist.
It doesn't work.
I thought you weren't an artist. You just described art to me in 3 sentences. That's exactly what it's like. On a good night, it's like hitting the main line, man. It's there's nothing better. Nothing better. You're
right.
That's right. There isn't. It's just
like John says, you could be as good as you can for 2 nights in a row, but one night that audience just didn't buy it. You just got to keep digging and digging and digging.
Yeah.
We got to say, what happens in Tampa is not going to work in Atlanta. And you guys run through the same thing there in your business.
Some nights, man, you just it whatever. I think it's just the universe kind of pulling you back. It doesn't want you to get too big-headed. But some nights, you hit a situation where you're not connecting with the audience for whatever reason. Whether it's just the way you're doing it or what. But and you just knuckle down and get through that and try to do the best you can. Fortunately, those nights aren't the rule. They're usually the exception. That's what makes them stick out more, because when you have a night like that where it's just kind of weird, you just go back to the dressing room and go, what the hell was that?
I wonder what was I doing after that I didn't do last night.
Exactly.
And is it not just the greatest feeling in the world? I mean, it's just when you sit there and you think, and I know you've had this moment on stage where you think, oh my God, I've got him. Got him. And it just, if I just don't screw this up, this is going to be magic.
And if you think that, you're going to screw it up.
That's right. That's right.
Keep going. Just keep doing it and just keep enjoying it and then brag about it afterwards. That's the trick,
How much touring now are you doing with Foghat?
We're doing probably about 70 dates a year. It's, usually, like I said, it's usually weekends, usually 2-3 days out. And that's a good pace. I mean, I'm the young guy, so I'm always the one going, let's keep going. But I'm just appreciative that we're out there when we are.
Yeah, I heard on a podcast too, Scott, that you're also a businessman, that you got a record shop. Is that record shop still going? Tell us a little bit about that.
I've got a record store in Columbia, Tennessee called Variety Records, and I am absolutely not a businessman. The only smart thing I did with the record store, I got a partner, me and him are partners in it, but the only smart thing we did was we hired a really, really good guy to run the place for us. And he knows more about record stores than I'll ever know. And all I do is go in and say hi to him and leave him alone.
That's smart. That makes you a good businessman, right?
That's
there.
exactly right. I know enough about business to know I don't know anything about business.
Now, do musicians stop in and you guys jam in that place too? It's kind of like the old Ernest Tubb record shop down on 16th Avenue.
Well, the funny thing about it, the store that I own was originally Ernest Tubb Records #2. Yeah.
Wow.
And the lady bought it from them, whoever was running Ernest Tubb Records. I don't know if it was Ernest Tubb. And she had the record store from the 1969, I think was when she started it. And so, yeah, when we took it over, the first thing we did was we had a Bobby Rush show in there. We had the great bluesman Bobby Rush came and did a solo performance. I've played in there a bunch of times. Foghat's played in there. At the time, it was Earl and the Agitators because I was singing, but now technically it was a Foghat show. So So yeah, we have live music in there, and it's just a, it's a little bitty space. It's not a real big store, but it's funky and welcoming, and it's just full of love and happiness.
Speaking of business, how has the business changed of records? I mean, obviously it's changed dramatically with iTunes, with how it's distributed. Content obviously is still king, but how it gets distributed has changed dramatically. How has the metrics changed? Not necessarily the quantity of money, but where do you get most of your money now as a musician? Is it from touring? Is it from record sales? Is it from iTunes? How does that change?
I think, well, I mean, from my standpoint, it's always been your primary source of money was touring. I mean, I never made much off of records. You made the records as promotion for the touring, and the delivery system of music has gotten so lopsided now. With streaming and stuff like that, where the amount of money that the percentage that the artist receives from something like streaming is ridiculous. I mean, it's subdivided pennies, and that's kind of crazy. But not to get too down, but the long-term effects of this, I think, is that it's sort of trained the public to think of music as something that should be free, and that it does, and that devalues it, which to me I think is going to be a long-term damaging thing to the art form. I think that if you don't think something's worth anything, you kind of don't respect it, and I think that's a sad trend that I hope gets turned around, because everything goes in cycles. So, hopefully this will too. I mean, vinyl's come back, albums have come back. We went through the 8 tracks and the cassettes and the CDs and the MP3s, and now people are putting an album on and going, whoa, this sounds way better. And it does, but you can't carry albums with you on the road. So, it's nice to have both.
Yeah. So when you put a song out, do you put it out by album and then you put it also out on iTunes, or do you differentiate? Some guys have stayed away from iTunes. How do you guys put it out?
It pretty much hits all platforms. I mean, with this record in particular, I know that we released singles in anticipation of the record. We released 3 singles before we put the album out, and then it's on all the streaming services. It's on iTunes, and the physical copies are available too, on Amazon or Foghat.com or wherever you buy music from. And so you try to reach as many people as you can. I mean, I hesitate to say the older Foghat fans are probably more interested in the physical, the CD or the album. But the kids,
that would be me and Mr. Brisco. That was a
kind
way of saying us.
It's me too. It's me too. Yeah. But like my daughter, she's 23, and she's listening to us on Spotify. So it's you try to reach everybody,
Yeah, so when you it seems really difficult now when you get a top album, #1 album like you guys have now, it seems like it's a lot harder these days to get a #1 selling album than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago. Is that true?
It's hard to get anybody to hear your album.
Yeah.
Let's get it on a chart, Yeah. I mean, because everybody can make a record now. The technology is. I'm talking to you guys on a laptop that I could do an album sitting here, right. and distribute it worldwide myself. Nobody would ever hear it, but I'm just saying it's the possibilities.
Well, you're saying John and I don't sell? What?
That's right.
Hey, let's try it.
He said I could do it with you guys and nobody would hear it. He didn't say doing it alone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's you try to reach everybody, and there's a lot of white noise. There's a lot of music out there, a lot of content out there, and so those things, they marry up. The decrease in the respect for the art form, coupled with the fact that everybody's doing it, and you got, I don't know, man, I could get into a whole long thing about that, but the bottom line is, we make music because we're musicians and it's what we do, and we're going to do that no matter what the business side of things has to say about it.
Did you write the song about Hank Williams on the Sonic Mojo?
No, that was co-wrote it. That was actually Roger's brother, Colin Earl, who was in a band called Mungo Jerry back in the
Mungo Jerry. I
yeah,
remember
yeah. So he had these lyrics, and Roger gave them to me and said, let's try to do something with this, and so we kind of pushed them around a little bit and made it sort of have some rhythm to it, and it was cool to write a song that was kind of nodding towards Hank Williams. I'm a big Hank Williams fan, so it was cool to do that.
Yeah. Good Lord, who isn't? I mean, really,
I don't trust them if they ain't.
He's one of those guys, that's almost safe to like Hank Williams. Everybody like, okay, that's fine. Some guys you say you like them, and there's always some detractor about it. But Hank Williams is one of those guys who's been around. If you're around long enough, people start disliking you because you're around for so long.
Well, Hank Jr. had a great song called "If You Don't Like Hank Williams, You Can Kiss My Ass."
Kiss my ass, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to scream that one up and down the road too.
I feel the same way about Foghat, by the way.
I'm a Foghat fan, thank goodness.
There you go.
Well, Scott, we kept you for an hour. I can't thank you enough. I've had so much fun the last couple of days getting ready for this interview, listening to all your music and everything that's going on. It's just, you have such an incredible story and such an incredible catalog of music that this has been a lot of fun. So I know you're busy. I know you got touring and stuff coming up, but thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
Man, it's been an absolute ball. I really appreciate this. Has been the most fun interview I've done so far, and I really appreciate it. It's been great meeting you guys.
Thanks a lot. I hope to run into you somewhere down the line here.
Absolutely. Let's make that happen.